यह ज्ञान की दुनिया, यहाँ दुनिया का ज्ञान, कृषि विज्ञान और अनुसंधान, नए क्षितिज अब छू रही शिक्षा, ऑनलाइन पढ़ाई संग लग रही कक्षा.
Greetings of the day, and it's my pleasure to begin this plenary session 3 as we are already short of the time, and I request all the dignitaries for the session. At the outset, I extend the greetings and call upon and invite Dr. A.K. Singh Saab, Vice Chancellor Rani Lakshmi Bai, Central Agriculture University, Delhi, to co-chair the session. I also have the kind attention of the reporters, Mr. Akshay Dheeraj and Dr. Madhu from ISRI New Delhi, to be ready for the session. With the great honor, I invite our presenters of the session, Dr. Joshua Valita, Director of Open Distance and E-Learning, Ministry of Education, Malawi Government, Malawi. Please come on the dais. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Maurice Thomas from the Howard University, Washington, USA. Please come on the dais so that we can start the session. Our next speaker is Dr. Eugenie Polikavo from the Netherlands Economic Observatory, Netherlands. I request Dr. A.K. Singh Saab, Vice Chancellor Rani Lakshmi Bai, Central Agriculture University, Jhansi, to please come on the dais and grace the session as the co-chair. We know that post-meal sessions are always the challenging task, but this session is very important because after all the principles, the theories and practices, if there are not case studies and the real practitioner's story, I think it is just like a meal which is without the seasoning and which has no taste. So I request to all audience, so kindly be attentive that this session is going to be very informative and very effective, because what we have learned since last 2 days and have been presented in this last 3 sessions and the panel discussions in this session, basically the important case studies which are the soul of the this particular theme of this our conference. Specifically, the theme of this session is models and studies on blended learning ecosystem. It's a matter of great pleasure for me that we have Dr. A.K. Singh Saab, Vice Chancellor Rani Lakshmi Bai, Central Agriculture University, Jhansi, as the co-chair. We extend hearty welcome you, sir, at this plenary session 3. We have Dr. Joshua Valita from as a speaker in this session. He is the Director, Open Distance and E-Learning, Ministry of Education, Malawi Government, Malawi. Welcome, sir, at this session. Dr. Maurice Thomas, he is from the Howard University, Washington, USA. I extend hearty welcome to this plenary session 3rd. Then we have the eminent speaker, Dr. Eugenie Polikavo from the Netherlands Economic Observatory, Netherlands. Hearty welcome to you, sir, in this session. It's really a matter of great pleasure for me to introduce our eminent co-chair, Dr. A.K. Singh Saab, and for the knowledge of our learned audience, we all know the name of Dr. A.K. Singh Saab, who has given a great leadership to the Division of Agriculture Extension Education in India as a Deputy Director General Agriculture Education System at Indian Council of Agriculture Research, New Delhi. And I am extremely glad, sir, to extend hearty welcome to you. And Dr. Singh is globally known for his work in the agriculture extension system. He is one of the renowned scientists, educator, and institution builder who is immensely recognized for promoting the farm literacy, farmers' innovation, establishing partnership between farmers and researchers, promotion of the digitization in Krishi Vigyan Kendras, and providing the effective teaching learning systems and dedicating life to the science and society, bringing the key reforms in agriculture education, extension and development system in the country. He has been known globally for his work in developing the new tools, technologies, approaches, models, and technology adaptation strategies as a scientist in agriculture extension education in the country. He has been a great contributor in the country to bring the change, not only in the agriculture extension system, but overall in the rural development in the country. He has been the fellow of Indian Society of Extension Education, as EE Society, then Confederation of Horticulture Association of India, then International Society of Non-Science, Andaman Science Association, Society of Agriculture Professional, Uttar Pradesh Academy of Agriculture Sciences, and he is the known researcher in the field of extension education. Sir, it's my pleasure to extend hearty welcome to you this session. We have very important presentations in this session. We know that if we don't have the case studies in any kind of the conference and deliberations, it is out of the soul and it is away from the real content, because these are the case studies which will show us that how the problems are being taken up, how these problems have been solved, and what are the challenges have been tackled while keeping into mind the theme of the session. And we have the presenters from the different countries, USA, Malawi, and Netherlands. And basically, in this particular session, there have been given a due highlight on the importance of how the change in the blended learning system, ecosystem can be brought into in a country, in a system, in an individual. The leadership will matter a lot. There are the presentations on that, how it can be speed up based on the real time and real situation at real place based on the real problems, and overall how the economics will be governed when we take up so many tools and strategies which are needed for the setting the tone of digital infrastructure, digital content, and digital delivery. All these have been included in the different presentations which will be taken up by different presenters. I once again extend hearty welcome to the dais and all speakers and our Deputy Director General Education and the Chairman of the Organizing Committee and all esteemed members to this particular session. And really this post-lunch or post-meal session is always a challenging task for not for the audience but for the speakers. And when I take the experience of my previous such kind of the sessions, then if I take that case study of the previous session, then it reminds me that for that purpose our speakers and the presenters should be ready, that the session should be cut short. They should be, rather than being more professional speakers, they should blend the motivational notes also into their speaks, so that it can be more inspiring and more energetic during the post-lunch session. With these remarks, I pass on the dais to our co-chair for the remarks, and then we will start with the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Should I take it up now?
Yeah, otherwise, I call upon to speaker, then finally we'll take your concluding remarks. Yeah. Now, I extend a hearty welcome to Dr. Joshua Valeta.
Dr. Sharma, let me.
Sure.
I will take it up.
Sure.
So thank you, Dr. Sharma, for introducing all of us in this very important session, plenary session 3, which is on models and studies on blended learning ecosystem. And in the previous session, a lot of discussions have already taken place on blended learning. And this particular session, I hope, will try to focus on certain case studies which have been done on blended learning. And also there will be some key lectures on experiences which are there in case of learning tools, digital tools. And we have got very distinguished colleagues here, the experts from different countries. And they will be speaking the kinds of experiences which they have been able to gain. Now, once we talk of blending, many times the focus has come up the scenario of COVID, in what happened in that situation and how we are able to make certain changes and bring different tools and methods for educating the students and also the other clientele wherever certain kind of capacity building was required. Blending, I think, is a term which has been used since quite long. And in today's context, it is being used more because we find that many developments are happening on ICT grounds also. And otherwise also there are many experiments which are happening, which tells that what kind of blending is required. And also for different kinds of recipients, different kinds of blendings are required. In the previous session, it was discussed that the farmers to be capacitated, the students, even entrepreneurs, and all other who are trying to get certain kind of education, a different sets of blending is required. And what should be the proportion? Again, it is going to be differing. It will not be a kind of static, you can say, approach from our side, but it has to be varied one as per the need and as per the situation. We have to come up with various kinds of models. So let us hear some of our experts who are here, those who have been working in this area. First of all, I will request Dr. Joshua Valletta. I will start this session with him, and he will be presenting a case study. Dr. Valletta has been Director of Open Distance and E-Learning, Ministry of Education, Malawi. Dr. Valletta has 17 years of experience in education. He has a unique combination of science, leadership, and education training and practice. He worked at USAID Malawi as a senior educational specialist after serving as the Open and Distance Learning Director for the USAID-funded program called Strengthening Higher Education Access in Malawi activity. The subject of his case study is Change Leadership for Blended Learning in Higher Education, the case of Malawi. So I welcome you, Dr. Joshua Valletta, for your presentation.
I was thinking while I was seated there to say, what should I do? Should I cut the presentation down to 5 minutes? Or I should, because honestly, the previous panel did a wonderful job. But then I realized that I think the design of this session was to bring more evidence. They discussed it, but now we want to look at the evidence that's there. In case you forget anything else that I might say, but maybe before that, I just wanted to say thank you to ICA and the team that made it possible for me to come and be here. But in terms of the subject matter we are discussing, if you forget anything else I'm going to say, remember this. It's all about leadership. If education is going to succeed on earth, it will depend on leaders. And we have leadership at different levels. One day I sat in a room. It looked like a boardroom, but it was not really a boardroom. And in that room, the chairperson was a very learned person. He's a professor. And sitting next to him were other professors and PhD holders. Himself, a vice chancellor, and the others were called deans. And as we sat there, we were looking at the results at the end of the semester. This gathering, you know it, is called the Senate. We were all about to agree that the students had failed and that they were dull students and that we should release the results, which would have meant that some of these students would go back home because they were dull students. Just before the judge used the hammer, I raised my hand up and I said, "Excuse me, chairperson, professor. We selected 20% out of the best students in this country. And today you are turning around and you want to tell the world that these students are dull." At the end, he and everyone else in the room agreed that it was the people gathered in that room that had failed the students and not the students themselves. We gathered also at Oxford a few months ago, and it was very clear from results, research results, credible research results from around 1958 or so, about close to 70 years ago, that our challenge in education is that we have not learned to learn. What am I suggesting? The point is that, and then I will start with the presentation. I'll run through and I'll try to manage the time. What we see is that as educationists, perhaps we have challenges with selling our story. How did it happen that all of a sudden we all accepted that our money would be managed by technology, our agriculture would be managed by technology, our health would also be managed by technology. But when it comes to education, the story is different. So my presentation, I hope this works. I will go through, thank you, wonderful. So I'm from a beautiful country called Malawi. Visitors, they call it the warm heart of Africa. And because of time, I will skip through a number of slides and I'll focus on the meat of the session. How many here agree? If you are with me. How many agree? Oh, I see quite a lot of us, we do agree that technology will not replace teachers. But how many agree with the second one? I have fewer hands now. The second one says that the teachers who use technology will probably replace the teachers who do not. I also liked what was said yesterday. The future is human. But the future of this human being is blended. We must be ready in the education ecosystem to learn from what has happened in the past, what is happening in all other sectors of the economies of this world, and do a better job when it comes to telling our story. That's where the challenge is. We need champions that can tell the story right. Maybe we need a bit of continuous professional development in the area of marketing so that we tell the story right. That requires leadership. We should be able to learn from the past and be ready for the future. I like what Paul Varela says. Maybe beginning with what Robert Greenleaf said. The most serious failure of leadership is failure to foresee. But then Varela says the trouble with our times is that our future is different. Perhaps governments and education leaders need to read this book we call The Past. It's an open book we call The Past, and try and understand, learn from there as we prepare human beings and ecosystems for tomorrow, today. So I will skip this one, but maybe just highlight one point, since it's a case study from Malawi, that we are trying to build a human capital for our new vision that we call Malawi 2063. We want to be an upper middle income country that is self-reliant and inclusively wealthy by 2063. By that year, we will have clocked 100 years post-independence. Now we realize for us to get there, we need the human capital that is very well groomed. As it is now, access to tertiary education is very low. The average for sub-Saharan Africa is 10%, we are at 3%. We're trying hard. But we realize that there is a vehicle that can help us to leapfrog, not crawl and try and play catch up. That graph there is showing us very clearly that from the time we became serious, a little bit serious about blended learning and open distance and e-learning, enrollments in higher education rose sharply. That's the steep graph that you see there. When we increased enrollment in higher education by just slightly over 20%, we realized that close to 50% of that was because of blended learning. And then when I was trying to do this case study, I said, what are the key questions? So we're asking 3 questions in terms of leadership and change management. Was the introduction of blended learning in the universities or tertiary education institutions planned? And the second question was, how was the change leadership executed? And the third, what lessons can we learn from this journey? So we looked at 31 tertiary education institutions. 6 of them are public universities, 3 of them are technical colleges, and 22 of them are technical colleges. But I'll focus on the universities, and the universities are represented there by their logos. The one in the middle left is an agricultural university. and that's where I come from, actually. What we noted was that for blended learning to increase in our country, it took foresight leadership from the government side and the leadership side of the universities. And it was the transformative education type that gave us good results and quickly. Improved funding for ODL, open distance and e-learning, or blended learning was very crucial, and then external factors. That, one of them being the COVID-19 that was already thanked yesterday, especially that it is officially over, so we can thank COVID-19. Well, from the government side, pushing or working with the higher education sector, what we have done over the few years is to be very clear about what the government wants. So we have been sending very clear messages to the higher education subsector. I said to my Honorable Minister and Secretary for Education, I said, please let's convene all the chairperson of councils of the universities, their vice chancellors and their university registrars, a team of 3 from all the public universities. We sat down with them and we told them those 5 things. 1, if you don't want to implement blended learning, don't do it. 2, if you decide to do it well. Don't damage the reputation, which is already at stake. As you know, the reputation of blended learning, and we've been discussing here. And then we assured them that we are there for them. That's why the government decided to establish the Directorate of Open Distance and E-Learning, where I sit, and they asked me to go and help them with that. But then, even after saying A, we also say D. Government policy is that you should do it. Why? Because blended learning is an accelerator of relevance and resilience when it comes to attaining the objectives and the goals of education. So we are developing an overarching strategy, but we want it to be a costed blended learning strategy for the whole country. We have managed to develop, of course, a policy, an open distance and e-learning policy, to show everyone else that we mean business and we know what we want as a government. And we want universities to follow suit. So what you see in front of you is an example of a representation of strategic thinking and leadership from the government side that tells us what we need to achieve by 2063 and what will be the contribution of education, and within education, what will be the contribution of blended learning. Then we came backwards a little bit, 2040, and backwards 2030, aligning with SDGs, and then also our Malawi Implementation Plan 1, and then midway 2025, and the first year of our existence, 2022, to show them in very clear terms. So what you have in the black box there, like the black box of an airplane, is what we need to do to achieve what you see in green there, which is coming from the objectives of the National Education Sector Investment Plan. And on top there in the trapezium, the clear box there is what we have in our education standards. So it's very clear, very forward-thinking, showing them what needs to be done. And then we went ahead and tried to mobilize resources, especially for the higher education subsector, which is what we are talking about here. So we have a number of programs that we have implemented over the past decade or so. And through that, we were able to expand a little bit the ODL infrastructure, expand programs in ODL, and then self-capacity enhancement and system capacity strengthening. That includes policy, and like I said, we've developed an open distance and e-learning policy. Now, remember the 3 questions that we asked. The first one was it a planned intervention? When we undertook this study, looking at the 31 institutions, what we found was that all of them had planned for it. But what we discovered was that planning did not really mean that they understood what they wanted. They heard about ODL and they thought it was a good thing and it would help them expand and bring in a little bit of money, and therefore they wanted it. But when it comes to implementing, they realize it's not as they thought. But universities are great places. I love universities. And never be mistaken. There are a few facts we must consider when we look at leadership at the university level and what has been happening in the pursuing of blended learning. One, professors are not experts at teaching. I think we all accept. If you're a professor here and you're honest enough in your heart, you're saying, you're right, young man, but be careful. But you see, they need to be motivated a little bit for them to want to learn how to teach. Although the teaching at the university is supposed to be different. The second thing is that when professors discover the power of education technology and the beauty about blending, they love it. The third one, students actually just survive their professors in the universities. That's why when a class fails, they clap hands and they rejoice. Each time there's an opportunity for them not to be in class, they're like, wow, yeah, that's good. At least today we're going to rest. But when COVID hit, they said, no, we want to be in class. What they don't realize is that actually what they would enjoy most is what blended learning offers. Our problem has been to sell to them what that blended learning that they need is all about and demonstrate it to them. I think that's a big question we're trying to crack here together. The how part, not the what anymore. And I think universities and professors, that's why universities have a research component, and it has to be a strong one. They are there to answer the question, how? It's no longer what. And don't think that universities, professors, and students don't know what they are doing. Don't dare say that. So when we asked the second question, how was the change leadership executed? So we approached it from a literature point of view. We also undertook some surveys, and we used an integrative approach. And what we saw there, in agreement with convention in the science of leadership and change leadership and management, thank you. What we saw was that there are 5 themes, common themes that came up. But amongst the leaders, in terms of how they approached leadership in blended learning, 1, vision was very important. 2, strategy was very important. 3, oversight was very, very, very important. 4, flexibility. And 5, resilience. And there are a number of factors under each one of them, which if you have time, you can study and see how they are linked or interrelated. I have 2 minutes. So what we saw was that when we started this phase, there were 3 leadership, change leadership styles that emerged. 1 was integrative leadership. We have universities where when they heard about blended learning and then they had put it in their strategic plan and they said it's time to implement it, they said, okay, we start with 1 program or 2 programs, 1 faculty, 1 program, and then we see how it goes. When it gets integrated into this department, we move to the next one. And then we have transformative leadership where they said, this is what we put in our strategic plan, and therefore we have to live true to our strategic plan. Let's integrate this in the systems. We will figure it as we go along, and we will learn the art and master it together. It's a policy, so let's go ahead and do it. And so that has led into very systematic improvements and increases in the adoption of blended learning in the universities, leading to the sharp increase that I showed you earlier on. I have 1 minute to finish now, and then the other one is change leadership crisis. That's the other scenario that we saw. There was one particular university where they had a champion, someone who really believed in blended learning, introduced it. He moved on to become the deputy vice chancellor, and when he passed on, the vision had not been sold to anyone. He became the deputy vice chancellor. The vice chancellor himself turned around, and they never did really do things that were favorable. Another vice chancellor came, no vision. Right now, they're on the verge of collapsing. Why? Vision, strategy, oversight, flexibility, and resilience. Flexibility refers to a greater extent to academicians who we understand. Most of them were trained through face-to-face programs, and we need to find the right way of selling the blended learning story to them and taking them by the hand, like Dr. Steele said, and Dr. Agrao as well. So to finish, what can we learn from what has happened? I think government leadership and financing is very critical. It's very paramount. And we need to prioritize policy and guidance. And this message, we are taking it along everywhere we go, telling the institutions, start with a policy, please. I know there's policy through practice that you can establish, but start with policy so that you agree right from the beginning. If I had the time, I was going to share with you how we approached it when I introduced ODL at an agriculture university. We took a very effective approach. We started with policy to get everyone to agree. And then when we are moving together, we are like, remember, we agreed. And so we agreed to agree. Establishing and supporting, of course, through an order unit that's vibrant, give power, give some level of control to those who are championing blended learning. A shared vision is important, and it's more effective to pursue blended learning as a means to an end. Don't talk about ODL programs standalone. Start with blended learning. Blend it and let them appreciate what it takes, and then you will see at the end. If you forget everything else, or you have very little room for you to deal with the recommendations, take the last one in red there. Design an ODL ecosystem for the most disadvantaged student and professor. And then if you do that, you will get it right, and you will have a system that works for everyone. So as a government, that's why we think we are on a mission, and our mission is exactly that, to develop an ecosystem, an ODL ecosystem. Like we heard yesterday, that's where the winning game is. And if you are a leader of a higher education institution, remember this. And for you to achieve this very effectively, you need to have a very strong internal awareness and training system for you to raise champions and support them, and everyone else is going to follow. With those very few remarks, I want to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Valeta, for making a wonderful presentation, focusing on leadership, the kind of attributes which are required, and how government policies can transform the entire system of education, and how the blending can also be taken for strengthening the education and also the training part. So thank you very much. If any question is there, we can take it up later on after all three presentations. Now the next topic is digital tools and enhanced learning models. And this will be done by Dr. Maurice Thomas. And Dr. Thomas is responsible for providing visionary, strategic, and operational leadership for the Office of Digital and Online Learning and the Center for Excellence in Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, Harvard University, Washington. He has developed a conceptual framework called the Enhanced Learning Model. This conceptual framework provides 7 strategies to inform intentional course design and delivery. So I will request you, Dr. Thomas, for your presentation.
So I just want to thank Dr. Agarwal and ICAR and the World Bank and everyone for having me. So since everyone can hear me, can I have you all just do something for me really quickly? Find someone next to you and turn to them and ask them, are you awake? And then wait for them to respond. So I want to wake you all up just a little. Another question, since we now know we can hear, and a few of you are awake, I think a few people are probably sleeping based on the response, is I want to just do a quick poll in the room to find out, do we have any students present, any learners? So I see a few students. And some people may fall in different categories. Faculty, can I see your hands? Okay. Administrators, so like the vice chancellors, administrators, and then technical or technological partners. Okay. Is there a group I didn't possibly get? So, okay, I kind of see what's in the room. So I saw a lot of faculty, a lot of administrators, only a few students. So today I will talk about digital tools and the enhanced learning model, and hopefully give some more content and context as we discuss the blended learning ecosystem. So, to start my talk, we'll define insanity. And yes, this is the right PowerPoint. So when we think about the definition of Albert Einstein's insanity, it says doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And if we had more time, I would ask you all, why do you think I included this definition to start this topic? And if you notice, next to this quote or this definition, I have a photo of a classroom. This classroom is not from the 21st century. It's not from the 20th century. It is likely from the 19th or the 18th century or before, but it doesn't look that different from many of our learning environments today. And so when we talk about blended learning, which is not new, and we talk about developing virtual learning and things of that nature, what we often try to do is find the way to incorporate and include it into the traditional paradigm. And so that's why I offer the definition of insanity, is because we want to get these different results, we have to be willing to do something completely new. And we may not know what that looks like and what it is, but it is not going to fit into our classrooms of yesterday or even today. So I want to pose that. I also want to pose that I hear a lot of, throughout the conference and doing this work, I do this work globally as I'm here now. I've been to other continents, other countries as well, and I do it all over the United States. And then I do it at Howard University, which is one of our preeminent national universities, which also happens to be a historically Black college university that produces some of the most prominent alums of any institution in the United States and probably in the world. And when we think about this and the context of blended learning, there's so much critique to virtual learning, there's so much critique to blended learning, but we haven't thought to critique, was our traditional learning ever all that we thought it was? And I think that we over-romanticize what was happening in face-to-face. And so I also want to offer that we need to think about all teaching and learning and all modalities very critically. So with that, I want to quickly look at some definitions that are directly related, and that is ecosystem. We've talked about ecosystem a lot, and I want to know if we thought about what an actual ecosystem is. And it's a biological community of interacting organisms in their physical environment. It also is defined as a complex network of interconnected systems or systems. And so when I first looked this up, I thought, well, the biological definition is more scientific, And then I love etymology and looking at words. I looked at biological, and it deals with living organisms. And a big part of this ecosystem is not something abstract, is not only tools, but it deals with people. It deals with our learners, and it deals with those who are facilitating the learner. And so it's interconnected. It's a living thing as well. So it's not project-based. We're not going to just develop something, we have it set, and we've accomplished it, we're done. This is living. So it's going to develop and it's going to grow as we grow and move. Another thing is, that's a definition that's important to consider, is a learning environment. It's more than just a classroom. It is a space that could be virtual, in person, or a combination, in which students or the learners feel safe and supported in their pursuit of knowledge, as well as inspired by their surroundings. So there is a purpose of the ecosystem and how we develop it. It is to provide a space for learning to occur. And then we have digital learning, which is an instructional practice that ultimately helps students. And we have to keep that at center, is that we're not just using tools for tools' sake, but the tools that we are implementing into our digital and our blended learning ecosystem is specifically to help the students to learn. This digital learning makes use of a broad range of technology-enhanced educational strategies. It includes various learning modalities. So this is having learners as well as the faculty who are competent and who have capacity for every learning environment, whether that's in person, hybrid or blended, virtual, or a combination, which we call high flex. I'm not sure if you all are using that terminology as well. So this leads us to the enhanced learning model. So when you have these tools, you have the content, you have blended learning, whether that be in person or virtual, it's important that we have best practices or research evidence-based teaching and learning tools, as well as teaching and learning strategies to inform what we do. So this is where the enhanced learning model comes into play. So there's been several studies that have been published and done with this model as a conceptual framework that I created. I'll tell you why I created the learning model. So you have learning scientists like myself whose background is in teaching and learning and facilitating learning and group interventions. However, most of our faculty are subject matter experts, and their preparation was not in how to facilitate learning. Their preparation was in some other discipline, but they are responsible for facilitating learning. And so when you think about learning science, we have so many learning theories such as connectivism, cognitivism, behaviorism, constructivism, Vark's theory, which is visual, auditory, reading and writing, kinesthetic, Gardner's multiple intelligence, Elyris's 3 dimensions of learning. All of these things, we cannot expect someone who might be, for instance, in agriculture to understand or know all of these learning theories and learning procedures. So I developed a model that pulls from all of these learning theories. You also have universal design for learning, which deals with multiple means of representation, expression, and engagement. In the U.S., we have something called Accessibility or Americans with Disability Act. So professors have to make sure their courses are accessible to learners, and this is a federal law. So again, professors shouldn't have to know all of these things themselves, but this model has different strategies to help to develop intentional course design and delivery. So the model is composed of 7 strategies that do just that informs intentional course design and delivery. So in the subsequent slides, I will briefly go through these 7 strategies. So the first strategy is engage. And engage deals with interacting with the learners. It is most concerned with knowing who the learners are. It is very difficult to engage with someone with whom you know nothing about. And so some ways to engage with learners, there are 3 ways to engage with learners. A lot of times when we think about the word engage, many of us think that it has something to do with gamification or fun or play, but engage, there are 3 levels of interaction of engagement when you think in the learning of facilitation. You want to engage the learners with the other learners, engage the learners with the content, and then engage the learner with yourself. And then because this is a higher education context, we also want to consider andragogy. So one of my colleagues earlier mentioned it, and I think there's only been one person, that's been the only other person to mention andragogy, and we often use the term pedagogy despite the root word being peda, which is for children. In pedagogy, it is very much about passive recipients and the learner just taking in the information, whereas andragogy has 6 assumptions. And so not to get too bogged down with all the 6 assumptions, but the overall aspect of andragogy, or the science or art of helping adults to learn, is that we consider the adult learner's experience, and then we guide and facilitate them to have an active role in their learning. It is not dependent upon only the subject matter expert. So the next strategy is navigate. Navigate is a simple idea about making sure that learners know and understand every aspect of the learning process or the learning. I want to back up a little bit. One thing about the enhanced learning model is not to say that learning isn't taking place or that instructors isn't doing some of these things, but it's to provide a framework for doing these and kind of more of a simplistic checklist for the many things that instructors and professors have to do. And so in navigating, in many instances, all courses across the world have a syllabi. However, we give that syllabi in many cases once, and it's kind of like the map for the course. Whereas the strategy of navigate is more similar to like the GPSs we use in our vehicles. It doesn't say when it turns on, you're going to go left, you're going to go right, you're going to go up 60 kilometers and go right, you're going to go, it doesn't give you all the information all at once. It takes you step to step through the process, ultimately getting you to your destination, hopefully without accident. So that's the concept of navigate. The learners know where they are, how much further they need to go, what's expected of them, are there any modifications? Those are the things that are concerned with the strategy of navigate. Next we have highlight. And even though I created this model, I think highlight might be one of my favorite and may be one of the most needed strategies with working with thousands of professors over the years. Many times subject matter experts have studied for decades and their content as far as in one, becoming prepared to actually be a subject matter expert and earning their various degrees, but then also in industry and in practice. And one thing that's difficult for subject matter experts is sometimes the ability to reduce that information to the specific course for that specific term, for that specific grade level, and not all of the ancillary or peripheral or related knowledge that gets to the actual learning objective. So highlight says or posits that only the essential information needed to achieve the desired learning outcomes, goals, and objectives should be included in any course session and any class as a whole, and that it also should consider the time frame allotted for that class. And I've been in many classes, many sections where academics have no concept of the time. So many times they say, I didn't get a chance to cover all of my content. Likely all that content was not needed to get the learner to their outcome or their objectives. Then we have assessments. Assessment is very important. And assessment, this strategy encourages providing considerations for the systematic basis for making inferences about learning. assessment is not just testing, but it is a system that is put in place to be able to to provide considerations about what is taking place. I've heard people mention Bloom's taxonomy, and it's very interesting, again, that we have romanticized the in-person instruction. If Bloom's taxonomy was understood for in-person, there would not be an issue when we get to the online or the blended learning concept. So we need to make sure that instructors understand how to create learning objectives that are measurable and that use measurable verbs so that whatever's supposed to take place in a particular class session, lesson, or particular course is achieved at the end. The assessment strategy also really gives more feedback about assessment being formative, meaning that learners are forming and developing. And I ask this question typically when I do this session is, how many of us have ever learned anything and got it all right the first time? Good, no one has said that. But in our courses, that is the expectation. And what we do is we assign points and grades to every lesson, which is not allowing the learners to form. What that does is that then adds stress and anxiety and things of that nature that then ultimately sometimes even impedes the summative assessment. So assessment shouldn't be punitive, but it should allow for the learners to form and develop in that content so they too can become subject matter experts in that area. Next, we have network. I've heard some of our colleagues mention and speak about the soft skills that are missing, and that our employers are constantly mentioning that learners are graduating with degrees, certificates, credentials, and not having the soft skills needed. Well, that doesn't just take place by osmosis. We have to actually create and foster opportunities for networking to take place in our courses. So I always ask faculty when I bring up network, are your courses providing an opportunity, an intentional opportunity for your learners to network or understand what networking means in that respective field? Networking looks different in education than it does in engineering, than it does in business, than it would in agriculture. But it is up to us as faculty to make sure that we are building into the curriculum, building into the course design, what network looks like so that our students understand and know how to network with one another. Some of that could be group work, some of that could be discussion-based, but networking is essential for enhancing the learning. Similar to network, but differentiated by networking is concerned with connecting the students to one another. The strategy of connect is the faculty making intentional efforts to connect with the learners. There's research that say that learners maximize their learning opportunities when they perceive a deeper connection with their instructors. Or said another way, learners learn better from those who they like and they relate to. And while teaching is not a popularity contest, it is more difficult to learn from someone that you don't feel a level of connection or a liking for. And last but not least, edutain. Edutain is a term that is coined that combines the terms educate and entertain. And many faculty colleagues sometimes resist, say, I'm not an entertainer. But one thing about neuroscience is the educational component of, or the entertainment or relevance component of education is very essential in neuroscience, which means that the technology, the innovation, the active learning, all of that speaks to the emotional aspects of learning. And research states that there's no part of learning that takes place with emotions being absent. And so the entertainment aspect or the relevance or the innovative aspect lends itself to the emotional component of the learners, which helps them to then better engage and better encompass the content that's being provided. So Edutain helps. And so some of the strategies suggest that you just be creative and innovative in the learning experience. That the learning fosters interaction activity, appropriate technology, and that learners are allowed to play an active role in their learning process. So how does this look in a blended learning ecosystem? So I've listed a few applications or digital learning tools. So you have apps, assistive technology, learning management systems, learning tools interoperability or LTIs, lecture capture, smart boards, web conferencing. These are some general categories for digital learning tools or a digital learning infrastructure which can lend itself to a blended learning ecosystem. And I've listed some of the functionality of them, and then listed that almost all of these can be applied and used in person, blended, online, and or high flex. Actually, high flex has been what we've done in this conference, where you've had people who've been remote, who've been a part of the process for those who are still here in person. And so I think that that's a part of the blended learning ecosystem as well. So you have these tools here. For the time's sake, I won't belabor the time and go further into them, but I want to show you how you could take this blended learning ecosystem and connect it to a learning model. So if you wanted to engage learners, you could look across the blended learning ecosystem or the digital learning tools, and you could apply the appropriate technology for those specific areas. So if you want to engage your learners, some ways to do that is to use such information, and Engage deals with, I'm just going to use this as an example, Engage deals with such things as getting to know the students, knowing what makes them interested in the content. What do they want to gain about this? How does the content in this course lead to helping them with their career aspirations? Well, you don't understand that without engaging them, and if you have a number of students, some easier ways to do that is with maybe a polling app or a polling software.
Bind it.
Okay. And so this gives you an overview of how you can connect those two. All of these, am I at full time?
Time is over, so you can take 1-2 minutes more.
Okay. So this basically just shows that the content, the strategies, the tools, the learning environment then enhances the learning, which then leads us to program completion, graduation, and career attainment. And I provided some photos of some people, and one person who's a Howard alum also is a daughter of India. She's a partially American and partially Indian descent, and Kamala Harris, and she's a Howard University alumni. And I brought this up not to just push Howard, but I wanted to push the aspect of that we never know who we are educating in our courses, and that our courses in this blended learning ecosystem is basically to make sure that the learners are achieving their intended outcomes and goals, and that the sky is the limit to what can happen when we do enhance the learning. And I will end with this quote: if you want something you've never done or never had, you must be willing to do something you've never done. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maurice Thomas, for a wonderful presentation, and also bringing different aspects of enhance how education system can be strengthened. So thank you very much. Now I will request Dr. Polikow, and he will speak on topic economic returns to agriculture research and development. Dr. Polikow is founder Netherlands Economic Observatory, Netherlands, and has more than 30 years work experience in the areas of regional economics, impact evaluation, international trade, and econometric estimation. As a senior researcher, He conducted research and consulting on European and Dutch regional and urban policies, impact assessment of research and development, and sectoral policies such as transport, industry, environment, jobs, and skills. In 2022, he established the practice of economic development in consulting firm NEO. So I will request Dr. Polikov for his presentation. 20 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. It has been a long day, so I will strictly keep to my 20 minutes. Okay, so this one. Okay. I will talk on economic returns to agricultural research and development, international experience, global experience in this. And I think this topic will be very interesting, very important for ICAR, because ICAR is the chief provider of R&D services in the country. Okay. Okay. We should understand that agriculture is one of the most technologically innovative and technologically dependent sectors. It has been so over centuries, if you look at agricultural R&D intensity, that which is the ratio of R&D expenditures to value added, so agricultural GDP. So it's much higher than the R&D expenditure of an average sector. Agricultural total productivity, which is productivity minus productivity of labor, capital, land, and inputs, is driven by R&D. So both in the developed and in the developing countries, more than half of total factor productivities is estimated to be driven by R&D. Returns to R&D bring higher productivity, quality, new and improved products, and environmental and social benefits or costs. As the last one, environmental and social benefits and costs, it could be plus or minus. We know that intensification of agriculture over the last many decades was done due to carbon-intensive technologies. Not even carbon-intensive, but I would say GHG-intensive technologies, because there are other greenhouse gases too. So now, it was never accounted as a negative impact on agriculture, on environment. But now, as we have climate change issues, that accounting on environmental cost should be clearly done, and carbon and GHG intensive R&D in agriculture reversed. So now we should save the greenhouse gases. Okay, in agriculture, the role of government is really crucial due to, it is very important in all sectors, but in agriculture is even more so, due to organization of the sector, very small players, highly risky production process, you don't know what will happen this year or next. If you leave things as they are without government involvement, there will be very little R&D in agriculture taken by the farmers. So this is called in economics market failure. And to mitigate this market failure, you need government involvement. And now, because we have these climate challenges, this involvement is even more important. Because you really need to reverse your R&D characteristics. A few words how R&D is characterized and measured. So basically, in the standard OECD manual, it is characterized by performer, who does it. So government or private sector, is it fundamental or applied research? Is it universities or research institutes? Then by funder, who pays for it? Extramural and intramural. So if the government pays for private company to conduct research, such things happen, that's extramural research. If you look at global geographical concentration of R&D research, it's very concentrated, and India comes in the third place. So it is a major technological system in the country that provides the third place of R&D, only behind China and the US. So private agricultural R&D is mostly carried out by input producer and food industry firms, headquarters in developing countries. So in the developed countries, private R&D now exceeds public R&D a little bit. But in the developing country, it also grows. Right now, it's a very small percentage, but it goes up as the economic development happens. I would I won't dwell too much on how exactly economists estimate this. I would say also that to estimate the returns, either as a rate of returns or the ratio of benefits to costs, you need to apply some kind of modeling, statistical or econometric modeling, because you cannot measure it directly. So your outcome of your exercise depends on what model you do, and over the time, this process started, this research started in 1950s, so it has been, 70 years. So indeed, it's science, and these methods changed. So the estimates changed. Basically, the two most important methods that we should keep in mind is that there is spillover of R&D. For instance, R&D in different countries could get into other countries, or spillover within country from different sectors, they also could get to agriculture, or between government and private sector. So these are the spillovers. So you have to take into account these spillovers. Second, it's a long gestation period and a long distributed lag benefit period, very long, up to 50 years. So you need to have a good model of this gestation and then benefit period. Very flexible model, how this lag is distributed. And a lot of research was done according to this lag. So both are not easy exercises. Okay, so there is critique. I wouldn't, again, it's for the specialists. So it's evolving start of the art, state of the art. One thing which I would mention here is because it's a 70-year exercise, agriculture is the most studied sector in terms of R&D effects, most studied sector of all sectors. There are hundreds, I think thousands of studies over those 70 years. There are databases like InStep database maintained by Minnesota, University of Minnesota. You can look online on every study ever done. So you have a very various estimates of R&D effectiveness. Okay. And basically it's mostly public R&D which was analyzed. Because agriculture, yes, it does exist, and in developed countries it's a lot, but this scientific process sort of concentrated on public agricultural R&D as it's sort of crucial. So it's huge variation of returns if you look into that database. Model, so the most likely interval is between 20 or 30% per year with a large spread. In developed countries, it is 20 to 35%. And benefits to cost ratio is 5 to 1 or to 15 to 1. You think it's a lot, 5 to 1 or 15 to 1, but you should understand that you have to take these benefits over 50 years. So your costs are now, your benefits are distributed over 50 years. But the recent studies, the more recent studies you get, the more methodology evolves, the smaller these returns become. So basically, the early naive approaches overestimated. When you include spillovers, when you introduce more flexible models for distributed lag benefits, then you get lower estimates. So if you look at the recent studies with quite flexible methodology of 71 low and middle income countries, so the return is only 6% on average. And ratio is only 4 to 1 over a 50-year period. And then by country, there are countries which have like 1-2% return, and the maximum return is 10 to 12%. But anyway, these are basically, if you take a social rate of return for developing country at 4 to 5%, so that's what you need. Then most of the countries, even in these recent studies, make it worse, the estimates to conduct public research and development. But in some countries, some developing countries, the returns are below the rate. So what does it mean? That means that returns of R&D, public agricultural R&D, is a complex interaction between a lot of factors. So it's efficiency of the system of the innovation, of the functioning of the innovation system in the country. Then you cannot say ad hoc that if you do a lot of R&D, you will get a lot of returns. You need to sort of fine-tune your innovation system. So basically, you need to develop it to have a healthy balance between fundamental research, applied research, and client orientation. So basically, you have in the country innovation capacity, how much R&D quality R&D you could produce, and then you have innovation, capacity to adopt. So how much of that return could be adopted? In order to increase your rates of return, you have to tackle both. You need to have an efficient, smart innovation system, but also you need to have a producer who is able to adapt those achievements. That's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Polikov. You saved 3-4 minutes. So great job done. And this return was very well, you can say, coincided with presentation. Now we are coming to the end of this plenary session, and if there are some questions or observations, not more than 2-3, we can take it up. If somebody is there and willing to put some observations. Yes, please.
Good evening, sir. My name is Dr. Sudhan Prasad Lal from RPCU Pusa. My question is from Polikov, sir. Sir talked about R&D high return in agriculture and talked about uncertainty also, and you suggested the cross-sectional econometric model. So can we adopt the longitudinal econometric model to remove that uncertainty if possible? Your say in it, sir.
Say it again. You see, the econometric models.
Yes.
Econometrics models were used from the start. It's the only way you can estimate it.
Yeah.
It's a panel model, so it's not cross-section. It's not only cross-section, but
Panel data you have used.
across time. These are panel models, and as you know, econometric models have uncertainty. They have errors. That's the definition of the econometric model. So you cannot reduce uncertainty. Then, in econometric models, you need factors and you need outcome. And your factors are very hard to measure. How do you measure spillovers? Very hard to measure. How you measure distributed lag over 50 years? It's not certain for each year. So these are very difficult questions statistically and methodologically. So you cannot remove uncertainty from an econometric models for these two reasons. And of course, there are a lot of methods. You use maximum likelihood, or or least squares, or what is panel estimation, etc. So it could be very difficult exercises.
Thank you, Dr. Polikov. Anyone else? Sir. Yes, please.
Doug Steele, Association of Public Land Universities, Washington, D.C. Dr. Valletta, we talked about how do you make this happen and how do you incentivize it, and you had a slide that said, the second point was we will not make you do this, and I think the fourth point was the government will make you do this. So how do you resolve those contradictory terms? And thank you.
Thanks very much, Doc. So the first point, actual point, was that if you don't want to do it, don't do it. The fourth point was that the government policy is that you should do it. So these are university people. We were hoping that by saying so, would drive the nail home that we want you to do it and do it well. And then we made a commitment to say, we are there for you. If you need financial assistance, we are there. If you need technical assistance, we are there. I think that was a kind of a sarcastic way of putting the message across. And guess what? Within just 1 or 2 years, they adopted a blended learning, and now they're going very high because of that clear messaging. And we believe that in the next 3 to 5 years, you see a very huge increase. And our hope is that we will hold their hands and we see greater heights together. Thank you.
Yes, last one.
So my name is Shreya Sawant from Dr. BSKK Vidapoli. My question is for Maurice Thomas, sir. In your enhanced learning model, the first E represents engage. And you said that there are 3 ways to engage. One is engage with other learners, one is engage with content, and the third one is engage with the self, right? So in the first, the engage with the other point, what do you think are the ways that students can engage in between their colleagues or participants in the class in an online mode of the blended learning method?
Sure, thank you for that. So I do want to clarify, the third one was engaging with the faculty. So learners are learner, learners are content, learners are faculty. But your question is, how do learners engage with one another in the online? There are a few ways. So we have learning management systems that allow for group work. We also have, if you're having a synchronous session, there are breakout groups that web conferencing tools allow, where you can break groups into groups where they work in that aspect independently. There are discussion boards that can happen where learners have discussion prompts. There's even, I would say, advice to sometimes let learners decide what the discussion prompts should be. The discussion prompts also don't have to only be in writing, but there's also tools that allow for voice, or they could create videos and create the videos and respond to one another videos. So those are just a few ways that learners can engage with one another in the online environment.
So now, thank you very much, each one of you. We are now finally closing this one. The session has been very interesting, and with the initial quote by Dr. Valeta that technology cannot replace the teachers. So that was the key message of the session, which I derive out of his presentation. And also he quoted that teachers with technology can be more performing than other teachers. So that is how we perceive that this is the era where we have to blend the technology with the traditional methods of teaching what we have been doing face to face. But time and again it is said that learning takes between a teacher and the, you can say, the recipient, the student. And both have to be in one environment. So how this virtual platform will create the real environment, that will be again a, you can say, always a challenge before us. But we have seen that this kind of virtual reality also making a huge impact in case of learning. But even then, the requirement of teacher always remains. In the Indian culture, we find that there is a huge relations between teacher and a student. And basically, teacher was one who used to decide the fate of the student itself, not only in the education aspect, but other family aspects also. So that kind of bondage was there between teacher and the student. But now with the commercial angle coming, so many other factors have come up, and the kind of respect and kind of ownership between teacher and the student, we don't find that one which is now, but again we are in different era and we have to behave in that way itself. Mention was made about the learning environment again, very, very important. And in a learning environment, we create wonderful learning environment, so it itself a kind of teaching environment. If somebody who is there, he can learn from the environment itself. So that is also very crucial. Infrastructure was also talked about. Government policies are very, very important in this direction. And that is where the other stakeholders which have to come forward. blending is not limited only to my perception, not only to the, you can say, digital blending, but other sorts of blending has to also happen, a kind of cultural and social, which is required for a holistic development of individual. And if that starts happening, probably more, you can say, complete kind of education can take place at different locations. Again, it was said that it's a emotion-related aspect. Its emotional feelings are attached to the, you can say, learning and teaching, and to, you can say, harness the entire potential of emotions and social aspects. The blending has to be done accordingly in the, you can say, our educational system. About digital tools, Dr. Maurice Thomas talked about in detail, and he came up with a model of Enhance. And many of the components of it elaborate so many things together, that how we can take it up and how we can nurture a student, how we can create an environment of learning, and how we can develop a teacher also, that is very, very important. So this, the kind of assessment, networking, connection, navigation, and even engaging, very, very important. So all these components are very important, and it will be very crucial. In the end, we had a presentation by Dr. Polico, who talked about a return to research, a return to investment and research, and this is one aspect which is always debated. Policy, you can say those who are policy makers, they always ask that what kind of returns we are deriving out of research and education and also the extension. And we are happy to see the kind of returns you are indicating, so much higher. We also got it studied here through IFRI, and they came up with almost 12% of returns from investment in India, in agriculture research system. But you are indicating almost 20%, 30% in the developed countries. And low-income countries, it is even lesser. So we have to find out the ways and means how these returns can be enhanced. At the end, I will thank each one of you who have made wonderful presentations, very specific presentations to this session, and also to the organizers, especially Dr. R.C. Agarwalji, our DDG Education from ICR, and all the team who has been behind him for organizing this very important. And these issues are not discussed quite often. I find many of the, you can say, technology-related seminars and symposiums happen, but the software aspect of education, not discussed much, that what kind of environment we need to create, what kind of learning skills need to be brought into the whole gamut of education, what kind of ecosystems as such we need to create in the campuses. I remember one professor who went for a visit for a monitoring of one institution. And when he was visiting that place, he was being narrated about the kinds of physical developments which have taken at the campus. This building has come up, this computer has come up. So he was basically, he was not happy with that kind of narration by the institution. And he came up that where is that integral part, software part which has to be there at the campus of any educational organization. If that is not there, probably these bricks and all these physical materials are not very, very important. So when we talk about the blending, infrastructure is very, very important, but this, you can say the soft skills part are equally important, and we have to look onto that one to build a kind of perfect educational system which can give a learning which brings out an individual who is mentally strong and also knowledge-wise, also he is perfect enough to deal with the society. So with these few words, I again thank you very much, Dr. Agarwal Sahab, and the entire team for holding this conference. Thank you so much.
I extend hearty gratitude and thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. A.K. Singh Saab for fantastically, nicely and precisely conducting this session, and in the last summarizing all aspects and the components of the different presentations very lucidly, and putting the crux of the messages and the critical remarks and suggestions in the last, and with the few recommendations from these three presentations. Thank you very much, sir, for co-chairing the session and enriching the whole audience with your great wisdom and the knowledge. I also extend hearty thanks to all three presenters who have nicely given the presentation on the different aspects covering, and also giving the talk within the time. Thanks a lot to all of you. Now, I request Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. A.K. Singh Saab to kindly come on in front of the dais and to give the memento in appreciation of the talk to our all presenters. I also request Dr. R.C. Agrawal Saab. Now, first of all, I request Dr. Joshua Valita to kindly come on in front and receive the memento from the Dr. A.K. Singh Saab. I request Dr. Maurice Thomas to kindly come and get the memento. Dr. Polyakov is requested to come. Dr. Polyakov, please come on the dais and receive the memento. It's my pleasure to invite our chairperson of the organizing committee, our Honorable Deputy Director General Agriculture Education, to give the memento to our co-chair, Honorable Vice Chancellor Dr. A.K. Singh Saab. Now I request all the presenters and the dignitaries on the dais for the group photo.
We will request Akshay and Madhu to kindly come on stage, the reporters for this session, to have a photograph.
यह दुनिया का ज्ञान, यह ज्ञान की दुनिया, यह दुनिया का ज्ञान। दुनिया का ज्ञान, ये ज्ञान की दुनिया, यह दुनिया का ज्ञान।